growth factor of oil and gas, we are seeing more domestic production the first time in 10 years. I don't know. To Senator Louisiana, I think that's a good thing. I think, right?
Good thing, and the senator from Alaska is, as usual on this subject, right on and in the mainstream of what most Americans, I believe, Mr. President, are speaking about. And I wanted to ask the senator from Alaska, following his comments, I mean, why do you think our friends on the Republican side want to spend this week beating up on the president as opposed to actually doing something that might help energy policy advance in the country? I don't know if they just don't realize that people are very frightened and anxious and upset about these prices, or what do you think is driving this sort of theater on the floor?
Well, I think it's, you said it in the question in a way, it's a lot of presidential politics, and I think what I hear when I go home, and you probably hear it too, that people are frustrated with that activity. I mean, think about this. Just a couple weeks ago, we passed a bipartisan transportation bill. Unbelievable, right? People said we can't do things together. 74 votes moved a bill with very diverse views, as we all know, but we worked it out. We spent 5 weeks doing it. 5 weeks after all the committees, months and months of work. And what do we end up with? A great product that went over to the House, now sits there languishing and not having anything happen to it. And what's interesting, if we don't do a good energy plan, here's what happens. Asphalt, which is a petroleum-based product, which builds those roads, only goes up. When that goes up, that means the amount of roads we want to build become less. It's not complicated here. Why they're not doing this, I mean, I think there was a lot, I think even some of their own members were surprised that they had to be told by their leadership to change their vote and do a certain type of vote. And now we're in this no-end product. In other words, we're not going to end up with anything. And I don't get it when I know they will go home just like you and I, and they will hear the same thing. Jobs, gas prices, and construction, housing market, what's happening. These are things we hear about.
Well, I hope
I'm surprised.
Yes, I'm surprised myself, and the senator from Alaska, I hope that when we do get back or go home, that the constituents from all of our states will say, you know, stop the bumper sticker politics on the floor of the Senate and get down to passing an energy bill. And I think, Mr. President, we most certainly, if we stop electioneering and start legislating, we could actually do that. Now, the senator from Alaska and I have been here a few years, longer than the senator, but he has been a most welcome addition, may I say, to this issue because he's knowledgeable. He comes from a state that is larger than almost half of the lower 48. His state is rich in resources. I've had the great pleasure to go to Alaska and looking forward to traveling there again this summer and actually going to the North Slope because we build in Louisiana, Mr. President, many of the ships that actually operate in Alaska for their exploration activities. Yes?
Make a comment that you just christened one of our new ships coming up. Yes. Icebreaker capacity to work for Shell to do what? Go right here.
Yes. And that ship was just christened this weekend in Louisiana, so the relationship between Alaska and Louisiana goes back a long way, and I'm very happy to have the senator here advocating for a smart and effective energy policy. This debate that some people are having, I don't feel that I'm included in that because we're having our own colloquy about, I think, serious issues, but this so-called debate that everybody else is having is going to result in nothing. Just a lot of sound bites. There will be no energy policy that comes out of this. Because the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, and everyone knows this that follows, both parties are guilty for not having the right kind of energy policy. Democrats and Republicans alike. Democrats, from my perspective, don't appreciate the way they should the need for more domestic drilling. And so they resist sometimes the need for more domestic drilling. I think Senator Begich and I have pointed out there are some places where there are people, governors and senators, Democratic senators, that are open to drilling. We could go to those places and do a better job of developing onshore and offshore. But Republicans are not good at all when it comes to conservation. and they resist helping the auto industry, for instance, to retool itself, which we know has had an absolute direct bottom line on less petroleum products being used for gasoline. Many of the new automobiles coming out of domestic manufacturers, because of what Democrats and President Obama led this effort, which he never gets enough credit for on the other side, to retool Detroit, so that just this week in the newspaper, I believe it was the Washington Post, I wanted to ask the senator from Alaska if he saw this article, the most amazing thing has happened over the last 10 years is that our imports of foreign oil have decreased for two reasons. One, we are producing more oil and gas at home, although there have been some setbacks with this administration, which we're not happy about, the two of us, but also because of the conservation that we have done in this country. Mass transit is a part of that, which many Republicans reject. Conservation initiatives is a major part of that, which Republicans reject. Helping the domestic auto industry, which even Mitt Romney, their leader on the Republican side, said that was a mistake to help Detroit, Ohio, et cetera, Detroit, Michigan, and places in Ohio. So I'm coming to the floor to say, this blame game is not going to work because both parties are really, I think, almost equally at fault. Senator Begich and I would like to believe that we kind of represent a little bit of the Democratic side, a little bit of the Republican side, coming from states, both of us being Democrats, but from states that know something about drilling. And I want to put up my map of Louisiana so that people believe when I say that we know something about drilling. This is what my state looks like. Now, some people might not like this picture. This is the oil and gas infrastructure in Louisiana. To somebody that's a purist and doesn't like pipelines and doesn't like oil wells and doesn't like leases, they may recoil at this. But people in Louisiana like this because this is about money, and it's about domestic energy self-sufficiency and independence. These are pipelines. I have 9,000 miles of pipelines under South Louisiana. We've been drilling onshore and offshore for the last 50 years. And until the Macondo well blew up in spectacular fashion and killed 11 people, which is very unfortunate, and the fault of BP and some of the contractors that weren't doing their jobs correctly, it's been for mostly successful, Mr. President. We've drilled 40,000 wells, 40,000. So when the senator from Alaska says, we know something about oil and gas drilling, trust me, it'd be like asking the senators from Michigan, do you know something about building cars? We know about this. We've been fracking, we've been using horizontal drilling, and we know that there is a lot of oil and gas still to be found. And the senator talked about some of his reserves. Senator, I know that you're aware that Louisiana, just off the coast of Louisiana, produces just about as much oil as we import from Saudi Arabia every year. I don't know if you knew that. And how are your reserves looking in Alaska?
Well, absolutely. Matter of fact, we have, as you know, this line, some might be watching saying, what is this line here? Well, this is the pipeline that brings resources from here down to Valdez and then ships it throughout, the country and the world. And it's about 10% of the oil for our country comes from Prudhoe Bay up here. What's amazing about this development, as it moves forward, it will obviously provide even more. And also, like you said, your map there, it's about jobs. I mean, when you think about this development, this could be upwards to 54,000+ jobs, estimated by an independent research arm. Plus, these jobs pay very well. On an average, $117,000 a year. I don't know about you. I think that's a good paying job.
It's a very good paying job, and this is a very good point, because I've tried to remind everyone here that this oil and gas industry that exists in Louisiana and Alaska does not just support the people in our state, Mr. President. Think about it. There are only 500,000 people in Alaska. If that's going to create 50,000 jobs, that would be 1 for every 10 people. But people fly in and fly out. They'll work for 2 weeks or a month and fly back. We have people working on our rigs that are from Maine or from Colorado or from New Mexico or from New York. Now, most of the people that work on offshore from the Gulf Coast states, I might admit and say, and you can tell this when you drive through the parking lots and see, you know, the license plates, which are easy to spot. But I can tell you that there are people from all over the country that work in this industry, and if I showed you a supplier line, you would see supplies coming from all over the United States to fund the operations. Like, for instance, the boat that is going to be operating in Alaska was built by people from Louisiana. And some of those boats are built in Mississippi. And some of that may even come from the East Coast. I don't know if the Senator's familiar with this.
Some of those ships will be refurbished, and some of the work that's being done is out of the port of Seattle and Tacoma in that region. You know, it's a nationwide aspect. Think about this. The oil and gas industry in 2011 produced 9% of the new jobs in this country. Let me repeat that. 9% of all the new jobs in this country came from the oil and gas industry. It's the fastest growing industry in producing jobs.
And it also is producing, Mr. President, it's also producing great wealth that I don't think people understand, because a lot of the land in the West is public land. And so you hear this debate about public land, et cetera. But most of the land in my state is private land. In fact, the federal government owns less than 2.5%. Now, we're at polar ends of this debate.
We're at the opposite ends.
We're at opposite ends because Alaska, the federal government, owns 90% of that state. It only owns 2.5% of my state, and the further east you go, it's less and less and less. So when you have more drilling, like in Louisiana, it's private landowners that are getting wealthy. In many of these instances, like in the Haynesville Shale, which is up along this area in Louisiana, northwest Louisiana, farmers whose lands were virtually worthless or who were growing crops but not really making it very well, now the gas has been discovered on their land, and so they're getting royalty checks for $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month. That's more money than people have made or ever dreamed about making. I've heard of royalty checks, $50,000 a month that people are getting. So they take that $50,000, they aren't even drilling for oil and gas, they've just leased their property, and they go out and start a business in their hometown, or they go out and buy two new automobiles for their family, or a new pickup truck for their operations. And I know the Senator understands the indirect impact.
That's right.
It's not just the direct jobs for the industry, but the wealth that's created for the personal, private, and the U.S. government collects quite a bit in taxes from this industry as well.
You know, if I could add, in this Chukchi, Beaufort, for example, it is estimated that the cumulative state, local, and federal value over the next 50 years in the sense of revenue stream is upwards to $100 billion. If you then talked about the payroll over the next 50 years for the same two areas, $150 billion. What happens to that $150 that people get paid? Exactly. They buy a house. They maybe put their kids through college, or they're vacationing, or they're improving their lifestyle. They're moving up. And that kind of money is significant. It has a multiplier effect that is hard to measure, but it's real. Anybody who sees someone making $117,000, they're spending that money in the economy. That's why you see the job growth you see here. So from my, and again, to the principal debate tonight that we're having, and we're kind of the minority of the minority in a way, that, we need to get back to the basic issue of what do we want in this country in a diversified, well-delivered energy plan, and we can get there. For example, we had a bill, and the other side just threw down the same old talking points a few weeks ago. It was an amendment, drill everywhere you can imagine. And I think you would say, as I would say, that it is about drilling, but responsibly, in the right areas that are the right kind of design. They had down here in Bristol Bay, the fish basket of this country, 40% of the fish caught, they wanted to drill there. And I said, I can't vote for that. It's a balanced approach.
We don't have to drill everywhere.
That's right.
We can drill in some places, and the resources are so spectacularly promising, Mr. President. And I have to get back to this sort of blaming President Obama for a minute. I don't know if they remember, my friends on the other side, who the president was when the governor of Florida was Governor Jeb Bush. a Republican, who opposed drilling in the Eastern Gulf. And the president at the time, his brother, George Bush, honored that no drilling pledge. So I just remind my friends on the other side, their party is not blameless in this debate, and they could do a lot better for the country if they'd stop trying to throw President Obama under the bus every minute, although I don't agree with all of his energy policies. I didn't agree with the moratorium in the Gulf. I don't agree with tapping Spro. I think they've made some strong points. But this argument should be not about hurting anyone. It should be about helping our country. And we help our country by a balanced approach, just like the senator from Alaska said, is how we came together on the transportation bill. It was balanced. It was compromise. It was a little of this and a little of that, and we put a jobs bill together that is really going to help our nation. We could put an energy bill together if we'd have both parties stop beating up. One party beats up on the companies, the other party beats up on the president, and the poor people are the ones that suffer. Now, I want to show you something about oil and gas taxes. And I know people say, oh, there goes Landrieu again. She's just, defending the oil and gas industry. Well, frankly, some of them in the industry and the industry itself should be defended because it's an honorable, good industry. It has provided jobs. It provides the oil that we needed to win World War II. How do you think the Allied troops got across Europe? They didn't do it on a wish and a prayer. That oil came out of the Permian Basin in Texas. We have a long, patriotic history of oil and gas drilling, and we, I guess, get our dander up when people want to beat up on the industry. And I just want to bring this sign up because people say, well, the oil industries get all these subsidies. I want to put two things into the record right now on this, which is why I'm against the Menendez proposal. It says, according to the Energy Information Administration, which is our administration, not a spin third-party, spin-meister group, it says the study published in 2008, oil and natural gas received only 13% of the subsidies, but produced 60% of the energy needed to power our country. I want to repeat that again. The oil and gas industry receives only 13% of all the subsidies, but we produce 60% of the energy that keeps the lights on in this building and powers everything in the country. We spend about $16.6 billion on U.S. energy subsidies over the course of 1 year on everything. Renewables, refined coal, nuclear, and others accounted for more than 85% of the subsidies. So the oil and gas industry got less than 13% of the subsidies, but they continue to be the, boogeyman in all of this. Now, in addition to receiving only 13% of the subsidies, my friend from Alaska will know this as well, look what tax rate they pay. ConocoPhillips paid 46%. This was effective tax rates from 2006 to 2010. Chevron paid 43%. They made a lot of money. They absolutely are making a lot of money. These are public companies. Their executives are paid well. I think they're probably paid a little more than I would, but that's what they're paid. But these are public companies, so shareholders are making money as well. But they're paying this very high rate in taxes. Look down here. Walmart only paid 33%. Philip Morris, cigarettes, they only paid 27%. PepsiCo, very good company, they only paid 24%. These are effective tax rates, and my favorite, although I like them very much, but GE only paid 9% effective tax rate. So when the senator says we need tax reform, we most certainly need tax reform. And if you came to me and said in a major bill, we're going to have an energy bill and we're going to have some tax reform to balance this out, I would be for that. But in good conscience, I can't take away the subsidies from oil and gas only when they only represent 13% of the overall subsidies but produce 60% of the energy. And I most certainly don't want to raise taxes on an industry right now with prices at the pump being high. All you're going to do is drive them up, which is the last thing we want to do, particularly when this is the truth about the tax rates. So again, the senator from Alaska is absolutely correct. This debate that we are not having, but everyone else is having, is not getting us very far.
Well, if I can add one more bit here before maybe we get to our final here, but let me just say this. If these incentives are so bad, then why are we at a 10-year high in production? Why do we see in Alaska more independence than ever before? Or probably in your state. I would venture to guess. You know, I remember a company, Anadarko, very small company. Now it's a very big company. And you look at all these different companies, part of these incentives are utilized to take hard-to-get areas and make them more profitable so they can produce them. Then the result is we now have more gas, for example, than we've had ever, and the price has dropped so far, people are very excited about it, which has now happened if you talk to the petrochemical industry. They love these low prices. Why? Because now they're producing more opportunities in this country to produce product that we used to produce overseas. So there's a ripple effect here that people say, well, these are bad incentives. Well, actually, we're producing more. They're paying, as you've laid out, one of the highest tax rates, so we're getting money back on our investment. And is there high prices? Yes, because we don't have a comprehensive energy plan that could help us figure out distribution better, how to make sure we have a diversified energy portfolio, and make sure we deliver it everywhere that we can. It's not complicated.
Yeah, and the senator's right about this, and I'm glad he mentioned this as well, Mr. President, because I also happen to represent a state that has a tremendous petrochemical industry. Of course, that's because the Mississippi River is there, as well as great finds in the 1950s and 60s for gas. And so when big companies, particularly petrochemicals, but big manufacturers, look around in the world to where they go, one thing they look at is the tax rate, but that's not really the most important. The other is to make sure they can find the skilled labor they need. But what they really need are cheap energy costs, because you can't produce steel competitively, for instance, if you don't have cheap energy. So a lot of these companies came to Louisiana in the 60s because why? Because we had cheap energy. Well, that changed, and a lot of them left. Now, also, maybe we did other things to drive them offshore, but you know what's happening today? Because of this $2 gas, they're all coming home. You should see the building that we have going on. That's why the Texas unemployment rate is the lowest in the nation. I mean, I know the governor would like to take all the credit for this. My governor likes to take all the credit for this, two outstanding, well-known Republican governors, but the fact of the matter is, they may be pretty good, but it's really the low price of energy that's driving this. And that could happen in Colorado, it could happen in Illinois, if we just support the oil and gas industry in a balanced way instead of choking it off. Not only does that money go to them, it helps undergird this entire industry, which employs millions of more people. And it helps us to compete better with China, better with India, and I know that the senator understands that. He doesn't have as much heavy construction or refining, I think, in Alaska because of a little bit of your isolation. But I think you can appreciate what happens in New Jersey and Louisiana and Illinois, just for an example.
Absolutely. I will tell you, you know, we've been exporting LNG for 40 years. And we've been doing that because of our ability to do so and being able to get to the Pacific Asian market. But we're, you know, overall, the state here, to all its natural resources, we are a net positive in our export trade. In other words, we actually help lower the trade deficit. It's a variety of reasons, our fish, our minerals, our gas, our natural resources. So we are a huge contributor to this economy in a lot of ways. And so I think, and I'm hopeful, and, you know, I've been here only 3 years, and, you know, I wake up every day being hopeful that at some point we will debate and have a real energy plan discussion. Because when we do that, the net result is Americans win, consumers win, our national security wins. Everything wins if we have a good, dependable energy policy that looks not only at today, but looks on down the road. And I think that my friend from Louisiana made a very good point about conservation, about those issues. I mean, we didn't, I think about the automobile industry. Because we came to their rescue, and we got a lot of criticism, all of us, the president included. We all got criticized for this. What's the result? Those folks paid back their loans. They're more innovative than ever before, but they also are producing more fuel-efficient cars, which saves fuel, and it saves on the long term our dependency on foreign products. That is a huge win. Some people say, well, that's not really conservation. That was a bailout of an auto. It's a combo. It's multifaceted. And for whatever reason, the other side doesn't see that. They see that as just another government thing. Well, they paid back. I can't remember, but it was a pretty good interest rate we got on that money, and they paid it back. But now they're being more innovative than ever before. Most recently, one of our American automobile industry makers talked about natural gas-fueled vehicles, that they want to move forward on that area. I don't know if that's going to be successful or not, but they are moving forward. Why? Because the price is lower. We have a lot of it. And they're an industry that's stronger than ever before. So as we sit here and talk about the importance of energy and how we have to develop our plan and have a diversified plan of action and from all sources. And, you know, as you went through that list of the subsidies, we do it in every arena. Why? Because we're trying to create this diversified energy portfolio for our national security, for our economic security, but also it creates other innovation that we see. And we know we can't depend on one type of fuel source, but all of it's part of the mix. And people who say we can't be oil and gas, they're dreaming. They're in another world. We have to have a multifaceted approach. And then we have to do it and deliver it for the benefit of the American people. And there's a way to do this. And so, again, I struggle tonight because of the vote I took yesterday, one of 4 that said, no, we're not moving forward, because I just saw what was going to happen. You know, by this weekend, I'll be back home talking to Alaskans and hearing their concerns about high energy costs in small villages to urban areas and asking the question, what are we doing? And I wish I could say, here's the answer, tomorrow your price goes down. But we don't have that answer, because for 3 years, at least I've been here, and you've been here longer, we've had a debate with really no substance of beef out there. We've had people put stuff on the table that, you know, the other side will vote against, and then you put another piece down, the other side votes against it. Instead of having meaningful, real, comprehensive energy, we have bills once in a while, you know, a little tax incentive here, a little tax, but not really about what are we going to do. So 20 years from now, all of us, my colleague from Louisiana, my colleague from Colorado, can look to our kids and our grandkids and say, we did the right thing because we're stronger, because we diversified our energy resources. Well, that, to me, is the fundamental issue that we will not get to with that debate. Like you said, we're not in it. We're in our own debate because we're a group of 4, 2 of them out tonight. The rest are in a different debate.
Well, yes, and I want to just reemphasize, too, the importance of getting back to the basics on energy policy. And I've been privileged to be here long enough where I've actually helped to pass 2 comprehensive energy bills. And I'd like to believe, because I remain hopeful every morning when I wake up. I'm a person, the glass is always half full and not half empty, and I try to remain optimistic even sometimes in the face of evidence to the contrary. But I continue to remain hopeful that we can continue. That's on the path of more energy independence for our country. That's why that article that was written this week that I'm going to find and put in the record was very telling to me, because I've been like the senator from Alaska. Are we making any progress? Are we really? And I believe in things, if you can't manage, if you can't measure. So what is the measurement? And one of the measurements is, are we importing more or less oil from dangerous places in the world? And when I saw that that had dropped by 15%, I was very encouraged. And the article pointed out 2 reasons, not one, not drill, baby, drill, or conserve, conserve only, but both, because America's been doing a better job, despite the setback with the moratorium, despite the setback with, the Deepwater Horizon, despite, some of the president's slow policies on drilling, and despite the Republican resistance to conservation, we've been doing something right, Senator, because we have reduced our dependence on foreign oil, which is good. We don't want to be dependent on Venezuela. We don't want to be dependent on the Mideast, particularly Saudi Arabia. They've been somewhat of an ally, but they don't share all of our values, let's be honest. I mean, women just got the right to drive this year. No, actually, to vote this year. I don't think they have the right to drive yet officially. So do we share those values? No. So why don't we kind of get back to the basics here of drilling more at home, promoting and expanding our nuclear industry safely. And I mean drilling where it's safe and not everywhere, like some of the Republicans. Let's drill everywhere. We don't have to drill everywhere. We just have to be smart and strategic about where we drill, compromise some about the places that are really, really opposed to it. We can drill more, have revenue sharing, which makes sense with the coastal states, for Alaska, for Louisiana, for Virginia, for Mississippi, for Alabama, which builds a strong partnership and stakeholders between the local, state, and federal. I think we could do more on building efficiency. We can do more on natural gas vehicles, so that, wouldn't it be wonderful to have the kind of vehicle where your car could run on electricity, it could run on, I don't know if this is possible yet, but we could experiment on electricity, on natural gas, or on petroleum fuels, or on diesel or bio. So that if the price of natural gas was low, you just sort of power yourself on natural gas. If your electric bill is low because you're on nuclear and nuclear price is low and you're getting your electricity from your nuclear power plant, you just plug in your automobile and you pay very little. Why can't we break this dependency by, A, producing more of everything at home and transforming our auto industry, which is the big pull of fuel? You know, our industry runs on coal or natural gas or some oil, but the real pull on this oil is our automobiles. So if we could get ourselves, that's why the Republicans are wrong. They don't want to fund this transformation, but we have to fund the transformation to help America move from an old-fashioned petrochemical, just fill up at the pump, you only have one thing to get, and it's petroleum. You could fill up with several other things. This isn't pie in the sky. This is happening right now, but with a little bit more government investment, it could happen more. And wouldn't that be a relief? Because the senator from Alaska will know this. Now, don't misquote me here, because I could get in trouble, so I'm going to be careful. But if we had a system like that and the price of gasoline was $10, no one would care. You know why? Because they wouldn't have to use it. Think about that. You wouldn't have to buy it. You wouldn't need it for your airplanes. You wouldn't need it for your trucks. You wouldn't need it for your cars, because we had created a system of choice. And choice is power for the consumer, really good choice. They could fill up their car with natural gas, or they could fill it up with another source. That's where we need to go. And then we'll break it. We'll break the dependency, because it could be $10, it could be $100 a gallon. Who would care? Because no one would have to buy it. So that's that's where we need to go. And we can get there. We're sort of creeping there. That's what this article also said. Inch by inch, we're getting that way. But we could accelerate it, no pun intended, if we get off of this ridiculous, you know, blame the person in the White House so you can win the next election and then get back to doing nothing. So I'm going to turn this conclusion over to the senator by saying that the debate about elections and bumper stickers, elections coming up and bumper stickers to put on the car isn't going to help. But a real debate, I'm ready for it. We've introduced several pieces of legislation. I've been a co-sponsor of every major piece of legislation since I've been here on any kind of major energy bill. It has to have a conservation component. It has to have an environmental safety component. It has to have more drilling, revenue sharing. And then I think an expansion of nuclear power would be very important. And then the right subsidy mix for the kinds of energy that we would like to produce in this nation. It would make our nation much stronger when it comes to, of course, energy, but it would make us so economically powerful, Mr. President, and it would make us militarily more powerful. because we would negotiate treaties differently if we didn't have to get on our hands and knees and ask people that don't even share our values to pump a little bit more gas for us. We could pump it ourselves. And I yield the floor to the senator from Alaska.
Thank you very much, my friend from Louisiana. I'll conclude by saying just a couple comments. Again, I think your point about smart and strategic, that's what we're saying. No one's saying either or. It has to be this or that. It's a combination of things. Some will be more expensive today, but maybe less later. I mean, think about the technology around a cell phone. The first time they came out, which used to be a box about yay big, you plug into your car, and then the big receiver would be in your trunk. Several $1,000s to buy that technology, if you remember that. And people were like, no one's ever going to do that. Now you can go down to the 7-Eleven, or in my state, it'd be the Holiday Store, and buy throwaway phones. It's amazing when you allow some expansion of this knowledge and the technology. Oil and gas brings new technology. You mentioned directional drilling as an example. New technology that's been developed in our state and your state to now create opportunities that shale gas is now doing. All kinds of opportunities. When you think of the security level, I know the president here has been, the senator from Colorado, in Armed Services Committee with me. We talk about this all the time. How do we get the biggest consumer, the military, to find new alternatives? And they're experimenting, but you know what's amazing? And we heard it last week and the week before. Our friends on the other side are wondering why the military is looking at alternative fuels. They actually ask, what gives you the authority to do that? Well, actually, when it costs you almost $400 a gallon to move diesel fuel to the front lines of Afghanistan, I think that's a hell of a good reason. They should be looking at what kinds of alternatives they can do. I have seen what they're doing. They're doing some amazing things with solar panels in small devices, which what's important about the military? That means they can move more rapidly through areas that they cannot have to worry about where's the diesel truck for the energy. But for rural Alaska, why is that technology important? In our rural villages where it's $10 and $11 a gallon for heating fuel, now there's technology. Instead of taking up a whole room, it's portable. And they can move it. They can use it. Saving consumers. So there's all kinds of things that we should be doing. And I know the other side will say, well, those cost too much, these cost too much. Always when you're in the R&D stage, things cost a lot. But when you slowly develop it and create the markets, and the military is a huge driver of a market. So I'm excited that they're in these areas. And I oppose the idea that some senators and House members, Republicans, that are saying they shouldn't be doing any experimental. Absolutely they should. They're a consumer of the product, the largest consumer. Let's have them give us some innovation, because people may forget that the same people doing the energy development in the early 60s, they're the ones that started the Internet, which we all now benefit from. Can you imagine in the 60s if we said to the military, yeah, we don't want you testing whatever that thing is you're calling the Internet system. We don't want that. That's all bad. You get out of that business. Where would we be today? Now, I would say, as a parent of a 9-year-old, I might have a different view, too, on this. That I may not want my son on the Internet all the time. So I might have a little different view, but let me put that aside. It has made a difference in our economy and everything else that's going on. So to conclude, I just would say that we have a chance to develop, to diversify, and deliver a real energy plan if we focus on it. That's what we should be doing. So I thank my colleague from Louisiana. I thank the senator from Colorado who's presiding tonight, the presiding officer, for allowing us to have a little rant here in our own world. But I think the world we talk about is the same world that almost everyone in America is living in. Gas prices that are high, wanting real solutions. And anyone who says there's a magic bullet that tomorrow the price will go down, that ain't happening. And I know the other side wants to make us believe we do certain things. I support the Keystone Pipeline. I know you support the Keystone, but that won't lower prices tomorrow. I support it for a variety of reasons. It's a long-term plan, jobs, a variety of things. But it won't lower prices tomorrow. Drilling in Chukchi and Beaufort, important to me. I think long-term jobs, but will it lower gas prices tomorrow? No. But these are the kind of things we need to be doing. Will us investing in conservation to ensure that commercial buildings and houses are more efficient turn a dollar right away? A little bit. But over the long haul, I'm doing an energy retrofit to my house in Anchorage. I'm going to save some money. That money's going to my pocket. Actually, will go in and go out because I got to put money aside for my son's education. But I got more money. So it plays over time. Nothing happens overnight. And it drives me crazy when I hear the other side say, this is like magic. Tomorrow things will change for you. I wish that was the case. We all wish that's the case. But we have to have this plan to get there. So I thank the Senator from Louisiana for joining me tonight. Thank you for standing tall when we took our vote yesterday. I think we made, I hope, our point, and now we need to move forward and hopefully get other people to follow the lead and do a comprehensive plan.
I thank Mr. President. While I'm on the floor, I'd like to speak for a few more minutes, if I might, on another subject, but one that's equally important. The senator from Alaska and I just spent some time talking about a balanced approach to energy production and the fact that if we could get there, we could create jobs. And the senator was saying that no matter what we do, it won't create jobs overnight. And he's right again. I mean, it will take a long time, but it won't lower the price overnight. It will create jobs. But there is a bill that actually will create millions of jobs overnight that's pending, hanging around this Capitol, that if we could get passed would mean a great deal immediately tomorrow, literally, the day after the bill is signed by the President. And that, Mr. President, is the Federal Highway and Transportation Bill, which last week was passed and compromised by one of the most liberal and progressive members of this body and one of the most conservative members of this body, Senator Boxer from California, Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma, worked for over a year and a half to put a transportation bill together, a 2-year transportation bill. Many of us would have liked it to be 5 years or 6 years, but 2 years is what they could negotiate, and you know what? It's a lot better than the short-term 3 months, 6 months, 2 months, 3 months temporary measures that I think we've been under for the last several years. That gives no consistency, none, for our states and our counties and our cities. It puts, if you talk about uncertainty, the business community, real estate developers, planners, community planners, transit planners, they don't know what it's going to look like 6 months from now or even next year. This bill would give at least 2 years of certainty, and we could come back hopefully and pass a long-term extension, 5 years or 6 years. But 2 years, Mr. President, is much better than 30 days or 60 days, 90 days, which is what the House is contemplating. I'm proud that the Democrats and some Republicans are standing up in the House and saying, no short-term extension. We have a bill. We have the Senate bill that got over 74 votes of Republicans and Democrats, compromised, again, between a more progressive and a more conservative member for the benefit of our country. 1.9 million jobs at stake. And for the Gulf Coast senators, there's an extra bonus besides funding our rail, our highways, and our transit. The Gulf Coast senators and House members from the states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida got a very significant amendment to fund the Restore Act, well, to fund coastal restoration and flood control protection and economic development in the Gulf Coast, directing the fine money that's going to be levied against BP in sometime in the next few weeks or months. Instead of that money coming to the federal treasury to be spent on a variety of different things, it would stay where the injury occurred, along the Gulf Coast. And 80% of that money would stay on those coastal areas and those coastal states, helping our economies to revive themselves and to save our coastlines. So Gulf Coast House members, I'm speaking and hoping that some of them will hear this message. Gulf Coast House members of either party, Democrats or Republicans, should stand tall and say, yes, let's pass the Senate transportation bill for the benefits that will come to our state and our nation, creating literally almost overnight 1 million or securing 1 million jobs for the country, helping our recovery. But tucked into the transportation bill is a bill that could bring billions of dollars to the Gulf Coast to help with coastal restoration, beach erosion. Our newspapers, because I've been getting the clips every day since we passed Restore, from Tampa, Florida, to Mobile, Alabama, to Jackson, Mississippi, to Gulfport, Mississippi, to the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, to the Houston Chronicle, and as far away newspapers as the New York Times, have editorialized on Pass the Restore Act Now, bring jobs and economic relief to the Gulf Coast, an area and environment that's been hard hit by the 5 million barrels of oil that were spilled in the Gulf just this month. When we go into April, it will be April 20th. So next month, it will be a 2-year anniversary. So I don't know what the House of Representatives is thinking. They've got a real jobs bill over there right now, voted on by Republicans and Democrats here, not just a few Republicans. I think more than half of the Republicans in the Senate joined with us to pass this bill. In addition, it has the Restore Act in it, which funds the, as you know, you had a great hand, Mr. President, in supporting the part of that bill, or part of that effort, not that bill, but part of that effort to fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which again will provide money to all the states for park restoration and maintenance and for land purchase with willing sellers. So I am here on the floor to support Barbara Boxer, to support Jim Inhofe, to say to the House, take the Senate transportation bill. Take it now. It's good for all of your states and for the Gulf Coast, House members particularly. And the Restore Act was very bipartisan and bicameral. There's a Restore Act very similar to ours. So please, let's join together, stop procrastinating, and pass this bill. We have had many, many supporters of this bill. The Chamber of Commerce said, and has put out messages to everyone today, the Chamber strongly supports this important legislation. Passing surface transportation reauthorization legislation is a specific action Congress and the administration can take right now to support job growth and economic productivity without adding to the deficit. And I just want to say one word about this extension. Extensions are not benign, as Senator Boxer told us today. Extensions in some states aren't worth the paper that this extension will be written on because, Mr. President, you know that most of these projects are funded by 75% approximately federal money, 25% local. Well, in the old days, when states were flush with cash and people were running surpluses, when we messed up in Congress like we're messing up now and not giving them a transportation bill on time, some of our states could just dip into their local money, keep their projects going, waiting for us to do our job. Mr. President, those days are over. Do you know any state in the Union running a massive surplus right now? Do you know any state, anywhere? I don't. Because states have drawn down their reserves. They're running on very tight budgets because they're all coming out of this recession. Even our state, that has a very low unemployment rate relative to everybody else, that really never experienced the recession like everyone else did, we still are running pretty sizable deficits at the state level. I can tell you my state doesn't have any extra cash to front the federal government. So when these projects run out and don't get not extended but don't get reauthorized, a lot of these transportation projects will come to a halt. States will stop buying right away. They will cancel or put on contract or put on hold. I mean, what's under contract, they will put on hold until the money comes forward. So I'm going to be in touch specifically with the state of Louisiana on how this is going to work in our state, but we were told today that there are a handful of states that have already started to put out notices to their contractors. There will be no more paychecks associated with this road project. or this bridge project or this mass transit project. And let me show you what I do know about our state. These are the grades that we get from the Civil Engineering Association. And I'm not proud of these grades, but the reason I'm not too embarrassed is because just about every state has these same grades. Because overall, America's infrastructure generally is graded at a D. Now, we're the most advanced country in the world, but get a D rating when it comes to our infrastructure, surface transportation, water infrastructure, dams, levees, etc. So our airports in Louisiana are to C. Our levees, despite the huge investment the federal government's made recently, but because of the long-standing, overall, long-term disinvestment or lower investment over time, we still have a C. Our bridges, we have more bridge surface than almost any state in America. I think we're third. We have a D minus. Our ports, we have more ports. In fact, our Mississippi Southern Port from Plaquemine to Baton Rouge is the largest port system in one of the largest in the world, definitely the largest in the country, C minus, and our roads are D. So this bill that Senator Boxer has been on the floor now all week, and I am joining her in helping her to tell the House of Representatives, you're playing with fire here, you're playing with dynamite here. I mean, we have got to get this transportation bill out. I'm sure that other states can benefit from this bill. If we don't, this will be the 9th short-term extension since 2009. People at home must think we have just lost our minds. The clearest thing to people at home, they may not understand, and sometimes it's hard for us to understand all the intricacies of every issue, but everyone in America, even our children, understand that to build roads, you need a road crew. To build bridges, you need a bridge crew. To build mass transit, you've got to have people actually building, construction jobs. We need jobs in America right now, yesterday, today, immediately. Why is the House of Representatives sitting on a bill that is paid for, contrary to some comments from House members, paid for, that will go for 2 years? Not as long as I would like. It's not 4 years. It's not 5 years, but it's 2 years. It's longer than the 3 months, 60 days, 90 days extensions that we've been living under since 2009. It's 2012. Let's get a transportation bill. And again, my final point for the Gulf Coast, this is critical. We have a major piece of legislation tucked inside of this bill. If the transportation bill that the Senate wrote passes, the Restore Act passes with it. We create an Oceans Trust Fund, land and water conservation with willing seller provisions, and we invest billions of dollars in the Gulf Coast. It's a real jobs bill, not a pretend jobs bill. It's a real jobs bill. It means everything to our states, whether you have a Republican or a Democratic governor. They're waiting on us to pass this bill so that they can get their people to work. And I know that mayors that I've spoken to, police jurors in our state, county commissioners are waiting for this money as well so that they can get plans and put people to work. So, Mr. President, I most certainly hope that in the next 24 hours, before we leave on Friday, the House of Representatives will pass the Senate transportation bill, send it over to us. Let's put our people to work. Only going to last 2 years. We can argue about the differences, about how the money should go directly to the states. We could argue about mass transit. We can debate that for the next 2 years. Let's pass the bill. Let's get it done. And I yield the floor. Mr. President,
Senator from Louisiana is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that on Wednesday, March 28th at 5 p.m., the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination in block, calendar number 464 and 497, that there be 60 minutes for debate equally divided in the usual form, that upon the use or yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on calendar number 464 and 497 in that order. The motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order, and that any related statements be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to consideration of S-Res 407 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 407, expressing the sense of the Senate that executives of the bankrupt firm MF Global should not be rewarded with bonuses while customer money is still missing.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I understand there are 3 bills at the desk, and I ask for their reading in block.
The clerk will read the title of the bills en bloc for the first time.
H.R. 2682, an act to provide end-user exemptions for certain provisions of the Commodity Exchange Act and the Security Exchange Act of 1934 and for other purposes. H.R. 2779, an act to exempt inter-affiliate swaps from certain regulatory requirements put in place by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. H.R. 4014, an act to amend the Federal Deposit Insurance Act with respect to information provided to the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection.
I now ask for a second reading, and I object to my own request, all in block.
Objection having been heard, the bills will receive their second reading on the next legislative day.
I yield the floor. No, I'm sorry. Hold on. I ask unanimous consent the Senate agree to the House request to return the papers on H.R. 5, the Health Act, and authorize the Secretary of the Senate to return the papers on H.R. 5 to the House of Representatives.
Without objection. So ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, the Senate adjourn until Wednesday, March 28th at 10 a.m., that following the prayer and pledge, the Journal of Proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the 2 leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S. 2230, the Paying a Fair Share Act, with the first hour equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders or their designees, with Republicans controlling the first 30 minutes and majority controlling the second 30 minutes. And then at 5 p.m., the Senate proceed to executive session under the previous order. Further, that the filing deadline for the first-degree amendments to S. 2204, the Repeal Big Oil Tax Subsidies Act, be 11 a.m. on Wednesday.
Without objection.
There will be 2 votes around 6 p.m. tomorrow on judicial nominations. Additionally, cloture was filed today on the Repeal Big Oil Subsidy Tax Act. If no agreement is reached, that vote will occur on Thursday. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.